Rescue helicopters hover directly over the coordinates. Twin turbine engines scream, shaking the humid air. The downdraft violently parts the upper canopy, exposing the forest floor. Men lean out of the open doors, straining against the green darkness below. They look for any trace of Shriver or the enemy forces. The jungle offers only empty, splintered trees. Search crews expect a visible debris field. They look for bodies, discarded rifles, or wide blood trails marking a withdrawal route. Instead, they stare at untouched terrain. The earth beneath the deafening rotors remains unnaturally silent. No smoke rises. No movement breaks the foliage. The physical reality of the MIA status begins exactly here. A soldier simply evaporates, leaving a void that defies logic. During the Vietnam War, over 2,500 American servicemen vanished. The dense border regions swallowed them whole. The Ho Chi Minh Trail network stretched for 16,000 kilometers under similar canopies. Ground patrol swept the adjacent zones. Surveillance flights mapped the exact grid. Every attempt met either heavy enemy resistance or profound emptiness. Then the physical void filled with whispers. From 1969 into the early 1970s, intelligence channels captured fragmented stories. Informants reported seeing a tall American moved between remote prisoner camps in Laos. Escaped captives described a quiet, high-value target held under heavy guard. The theories gained momentum. Families lived in a suspended state of grief. An unrecovered body strips relatives of basic certainty, replacing mourning with endless bureaucratic waiting. The military cannot close a file without proof. Shriver's name stayed on active MIA briefings for years. The government tracked the rumors across Southeast Asia. The family waited for an answer that the jungle refused to yield. Decades of investigations produced zero confirmed photographs. 4 agonizing years of waiting provided his family with zero physical proof of life or death. Between 1970 and 1974, this void was filled only by fragmented intelligence reports and the silence of the Department of the Army. Unverified rumors frequently drifted across the border from neutral Laos. They spoke of unidentified American prisoners held in hidden jungle camps. Analysts noted that several reported captives shared his exact height, aggressive build, and solitary habits. But without photographs or first-hand verification from returning prisoners, these leads simply evaporated into classified filing cabinets. The Pentagon continuously issued sanitized mail updates to his relatives. Officials offered them endless administrative procedures instead of a body to bury. While the government prepared to close his file, the missing operator was mutating into a military legend. Inside the secluded training camps of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, older Green Berets shared quiet stories about his terrifying focus. Fresh recruits did not study extreme human endurance by reading standardized field manuals. They learned it by hearing the whispered legacy of a soldier who willingly vanished into a classified conflict. Veterans recounted his habits around nighttime campfires. They preserved the memory of a man who traded his humanity for tactical perfection. Simultaneously, military bureaucrats sitting in brightly lit offices were stamping his final personnel documents. On June 10, 1974, the government formally declared Jerry Shriver presumed dead. The military required this administrative action merely to process financial benefits and permanently close his operational record. Over 50 grueling combat missions were crossed out by a single sheet of typed paper. His physical existence was replaced by the freezing texture of carved letters on black granite in Washington, District of Columbia. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial currently bears more than 58,000 names etched deeply into the dark wall. Each line represents a life consumed by the conflict. But the missing carry a different mark. Beside the names of men whose remains the jungle never surrendered, a small cross symbol sits permanently inscribed. His identity is forever locked into the public monument, but no physical grave has ever been found. The Washington Memorial holds his name, but the anatomy of his disappearance begins far from any monument. To understand how a veteran of 50 operations could simply evaporate, the timeline must rewind to April 24, 1969. Jerry Shriver held reassignment papers in his hands, guaranteeing a safe rotation home. He quietly folded the transfer orders. Instead, he volunteered for one final combat drop. The target coordinates pointed directly into Cambodia. Officially, American forces did not exist across that border. Unofficially, MACV-SOG teams hunted along the Ho Chi Minh Trail in total secrecy. Intelligence had just located a massive North Vietnamese Army command center near the line. Units running these covert operations sustained casualty rates frequently exceeding 100%. Every operative deploying there was statistically guaranteed to be wounded or killed. Enemy troop concentrations indicated a full battalion waiting beneath the canopy. Time-sensitive intelligence demanded an immediate response, forcing commanders to quickly form a strike force. Shriver assembled Recon Team Viper, combining seasoned Special Forces operators with highly trained indigenous fighters. They loaded into transport helicopters at dawn, planning to hit the objective and exfiltrate within hours. The choppers flared over a hot landing zone. The operatives hit the dirt and immediately advanced into the dense undergrowth. The moment the operatives hit the dirt, they found themselves inside a prepared kill zone. How does a reconnaissance patrol get caught in a heavy crossfire before even reaching their designated target? Command dropped them directly into the center of a heavily fortified bunker complex. Enemy patrols spotted the men moving through the undergrowth, and the surrounding jungle immediately erupted in sustained automatic fire. A standard North Vietnamese Army battalion numbered between 300 and 500 soldiers. This deployment created an overwhelming numerical superiority over the tiny American reconnaissance team. Master Sergeant Jerry Shriver immediately took control of the perimeter, pushing his men into defensive formations. He distributed firing roles and began coordinating incoming airstrikes while standing directly between the advancing enemy forces and his retreating team. Helicopters scrambled to reach their coordinates, but they remained helplessly circling above the dense jungle canopy. The sheer volume of ground fire and the thick trees made any safe landing impossible. Multiple gunships attempted to suppress the entrenched enemy positions, but the heavy anti-aircraft response forced them to maintain high altitudes. The ground team was entirely surrounded. Shriver made a conscious decision to hold the line and cover the extraction of his surviving operators. His calm voice echoed over the radio network, steadily breaking through the heavy static and the roar of machine gun bursts. He provided clear coordinates for the gunships overhead, directing artillery fire while laying down heavy suppressive bursts from his own weapon. According to the operators who managed to retreat, his final transmission confirmed he was staying behind to buy them necessary time. As the remaining men crawled toward the extraction point, hostile gunfire intensified around their perimeter. The extraction helicopters tried to hover close to the trees, absorbing heavy damage from the ground. Down below, the steady rhythm of Shriver's defensive fire anchored the chaotic withdrawal. The transmission abruptly cut out. That radio silence mirrored his tactics. A shadow struck in the thick brush, vanishing soundlessly before the NVA aimed. By April 1969, this soldier's path would end in the jungle. MACV-SOG commanders and the enemy feared him equally. They saw a myth. His name was Master Sergeant Jerry Michael Shriver. In April 1969, he walked into the jungle and vanished. Long before his final footsteps dissolved into the Vietnamese canopy, a lean and serious teenager named Jerry Michael Shriver hauled heavy crates to feed his family in Sacramento, Minnesota. He was born on September 4, 1941, down in Defuniak Springs, Florida, but his defining years belonged to the rural Midwest. His face always carried a weathered maturity that made him look far older than his actual age. While other youths chased popularity or local sports glory, he kept to himself and worked continuous odd jobs to bring money home. He avoided unnecessary fights entirely, observing the surrounding world from a calculated and distant perspective. The foundational discipline for a future operative was forged in the heavy, tense silence of his childhood living room. His father was a veteran of the First World War, and their household operated on rigid rules rather than open affection. Military service offered not an ideological calling, but the only familiar social structure for a boy accustomed to isolation and unspoken commands. This quiet rhythm of a remote farming community stood in stark contrast to the escalating paranoia of the Cold War. By 1962, the government was rapidly drafting young men as the Cuban Missile Crisis pushed the nation toward a potential nuclear exchange. The United States military urgently needed recruits for an expanding global confrontation, and this unassuming outsider perfectly fit the requirement. He walked into a local recruitment office and silently signed his enlistment contract without offering any grand explanations to his family. His quiet nature and sharp analytical mind had already primed him for a life completely detached from civilian expectations. He packed his few belongings and boarded a bus destined for the military barracks of Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. He reported to his newly assigned infantry unit and immediately commenced his fundamental combat training. Basic combat training quickly gave way to a specialized pipeline. 5th Special Forces Group. At Fort Bragg in North Carolina, his lifelong social isolation ceased to be a flaw. The military command recognized his quiet intensity. In the early 1960s, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy authorized a massive expansion of the Green Berets. The administration designed these units to fight unconventional proxy wars across the Third World. Shriver fit the psychological mold perfectly. His instructors did not demand outgoing sociability or loud leadership. They demanded lethal results. The systemic indoctrination pushed physical boundaries past normal endurance. Recruits learned to navigate the desolate expanse of the American Southwest with zero maps. Nighttime parachute jumps at low altitudes became a strictly enforced routine. The cold wind whistled violently against canvas parachute lines during rapid descents in pitch darkness. Shriver absorbed the intricate mechanics of demolition and survival without question. The Army deployed him on continuous rotations through the mountains of Europe and the dense jungles of Panama. He trained extensively alongside indigenous tribes. He observed their daily habits and unique survival tactics. He learned to weaponize local customs instead of fighting against them. Understanding the battlefield required deep linguistic infiltration. Shriver dedicated countless hours to studying complex foreign tongues. He mastered the tonal shifts of Vietnamese and Lao. He added French to his growing arsenal, dissecting a language left behind by colonial rule across Southeast Asia. The military spent years constructing a shadow specialist designed to vanish into alien cultures. Intelligence teams and foreign advisors guided these intensive joint exercises. The Green Berets transformed a teenager's psychological detachment into a tactical advantage. He never sought public praise. He focused entirely on perfecting the silent mechanics of irregular warfare. The years of preparation came to an end in 1966. Months later, his crafted skills met the raw reality of Kon Province. Most drafted men dreaded deep reconnaissance into enemy territory. They prayed to stay behind the wire. Jerry Shriver volunteered to go deeper. He did not arrive in Vietnam as a rookie. The military spent years training him to navigate and survive in this exact kind of hostile environment. He stepped off the transport plane ready to disappear. Kon Province anchored the volatile borders of Laos and Cambodia. The region spanned over 9,000 square kilometers of rugged, harsh terrain. A thick jungle canopy permanently blocked out the sun. While aircraft struggled to spot movement below the green roof, ground troops choked on the heavy stench of rotting vegetation. The air carried a permanent wet heat. Leeches clung to damp uniforms, while poisonous snakes nested under the rotting leaves. This hostile environment broke normal soldiers within weeks. Shriver adapted instantly. He embraced the extreme conditions faster than he ever accepted civilian life. His team conducted multi-day patrols without any external resupply. They carried only the bare essentials. The dense underbrush hid lethal traps constructed from sharpened bamboo. Viet Cong patrols moved unseen through these tangled thickets. The enemy utilized guerrilla tactics refined over decades of continuous warfare. They struck without warning and vanished back into the shadows. Shriver thrived in this heavy silence. During one early operation, his patrol moved within a few hundred meters of a major enemy base camp. Hostile forces quickly maneuvered to surround their position. Panic usually destroyed units facing these odds. Shriver maintained total control. He read the terrain by instinct, carved an escape route through the dense foliage, and guided his team to safety. Not a single man fell. He ignored standard rank protocols, leading his squad entirely by decisive action. He despised the safety of the fortified base camp. He wanted the green dark. His tactics remained silent, fast, and deadly. He preferred hunting his targets face to face, refusing to wait for them to strike first. A dark reputation started forming around his actions. The local population began to notice the lone soldier in black. By late 1966, rumors of the sergeant from Kontum reached high command. Within months, official dispatches stopped mentioning the sergeant by name. His presence mutated into a dark folklore among the local population. Over 1 million Montagnards inhabited the Central Highlands, and their animistic traditions warned that spirits of violently killed men were the most dangerous. Shriver became that primal fear. Villagers whispered about a man in black who initiated slaughters and dissolved into the mist. He became an unkillable omen. This ghostly reputation materialized during a classified operation deep inside Laos. Automatic fire suddenly shredded the heavy vegetation, trapping the reconnaissance team in a massive North Vietnamese ambush. Escape routes vanished. The squad faced total annihilation as the larger enemy unit tightened the perimeter. Shriver hoisted a heavy machine gun and secured fragmentation grenades to his harness. He sprinted straight into the hostile tree line, drawing the concentrated fire away from his men. His suicidal momentum fractured the North Vietnamese assault. This opened a narrow window for the extraction aircraft. The lone figure held the perimeter, trading bullets with the encroaching forces as his team scrambled aboard. He stayed on the ground alone, laying down continuous suppressing fire while the last helicopter gained altitude. Pilots who watched the lone gunner leap into the final extraction aircraft expected a deranged killer to disembark at the compound. Instead, the man stepping onto the tarmac possessed the clean face, light skin, and calm eyes of someone completely detached from the slaughter. He looked more like a quiet high school teacher than a hardened veteran of jungle warfare. Yet this unassuming figure orchestrated classified raids that left entire enemy columns decimated. By 1968, Jerry Shriver had cemented his reputation at the Kontum base. The remote forward operating facility housed the command and control central for covert cross-border incursions. Fellow operatives gave him a strange tribute, calling him the choir boy. The nickname underscored the stark reality of his daily routine. He would return from multi-day deep penetration patrols, with his uniform stiff from dried mud, enemy blood, and stale sweat. His boots would be rotting from the tropical dampness, but his face remained entirely placid. He would wash off the grime and look as though he had just strolled out of a quiet public library. His psychological isolation went far deeper than his serene expressions. The war had severed his ties to the civilian world. He survived ambushes and downed helicopters, walking out of heavy combat zones where most men vanished. He never asked for a break. He actively rejected standard military leave policies. He avoided journalists, ignored commendation ceremonies, and offered no motivational speeches during mission briefings. He spoke only to assigned targets. While other soldiers eagerly departed for rest rotations in Saigon, Shriver sat silently in Kontum, waiting for his next order. Remaining in Kontum, he systematically discarded everything tying him to regular military regulations. Over 300 rounds of ammunition, extra fragmentation grenades, and heavy rations replaced an entire supply platoon. He customized his arsenal for isolation. He clamped a standard-issue M14 rifle into a metal vise. The steel saw bit into the barrel. He cut the length down to maneuver through the Central Highlands, where triple canopy jungle reduced visibility to 5 meters. The modified weapon fired a massive 7.62 mm cartridge. The recoil from the shortened barrel bruised his shoulder. He packed a saw-off shotgun for sudden close-quarters encounters. He strapped extra grenades directly to his combat vest. Finally, he pulled on a black beret, deliberately defying strict uniform codes. The dead weight of explosives and canned food dug deep into his collarbones. A drafted infantryman in Vietnam carried roughly 60 rounds on a typical patrol. Special Forces operators routinely packed more than 300. This choice doubled their physical burden while marching through the 40-degree tropical heat. His loadout marked a total rejection of standard logistics. Calling in helicopter gunships handed grid coordinates to enemy trackers. Requesting fighter jets destroyed the cover of silence. He rejected air support outright. He refused to radio for quick reaction forces even while operating deep inside hostile territory. Dropping additional men into an active firefight meant risking more lives. He hauled the heavy gear himself to guarantee autonomy. He carried the operational burden of a full squad on his own back. Every piece of equipment ensured he never had to call for extraction. He cut ties with the outside world before crossing the wire. He relied on nobody else. This extreme level of jungle autonomy captured the attention of the highest military bureaucracy. The blueprints for a complex rescue operation were drawn up a full year before the helicopters launched. Senior commanders desperately needed practical insight into uncharted enemy territory. They pulled Jerry Shriver into the heavy silence of closed briefing rooms, where generals debated clandestine helicopter approach routes and anticipated ground resistance. A soldier entirely accustomed to sleeping in the mud was suddenly consulting polished staff officers on the mechanics of survival. They were targeting the Son Tay prison camp, preparing the logistics for a massive strike scheduled for November 1970. Intelligence reports suggested the guarded compound held over 50 captured American pilots. The objective sat exactly 32 kilometers west of the North Vietnamese capital. Shriver provided the planners with critical knowledge regarding hidden supply trails, prisoner movement patterns, and deployment under complete radio silence. Even while advising the Pentagon brass, he never stopped running parallel combat missions across the border. His specialized teams planted high explosives on enemy supply depots and executed calculated ambushes against transport convoys. These operations required days of exhausting navigation across rugged terrain, often culminating in minutes of intense combat. Extraction was never guaranteed. The immense gap between the sterile staff headquarters and the grim reality of the jungle defined his daily existence. His unmatched effectiveness behind enemy lines earned him multiple combat decorations, including the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. The parade ground prestige meant nothing to a man living in the shadows. He took the Silver Star without any formal ceremony and quietly returned to planning his next ambush. The parade medals obscured a much darker truth. Shriver belonged to a military unit designed solely for missions that never officially occurred. In November 1967, he joined MACV-SOG. The acronym stood for Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. The name was a bureaucratic shield. In reality, it was a black ops program tasked with erasing men from the grid. Before 1970, the United States government publicly denied any troop presence in Laos and Cambodia. Yet the North Vietnamese army moved massive supply columns through these neutral territories. They utilized the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This logistical network comprised over 16,000 kilometers of hidden pathways and staging areas. To sever these arteries, MACV-SOG sent small reconnaissance teams directly into the legal void. The protocol was rigid. Soldiers handed over their dog tags before departure. They carried no military identification, taking weapons without serial numbers. They crossed international borders completely stripped of legal status. Shriver operated out of Command and Control Central. This forward operating base launched men into some of the most dangerous sectors of the entire war. Recon teams faced a casualty rate exceeding 100%. Meaning nearly every single operator was eventually wounded or killed. The deployments required total physical and psychological isolation. A mixed squad of American Green Berets and indigenous Nun mercenaries steps across the unmarked borderline. They carry specialized suppressed weapons and heavy rucksacks. The men move silently into the dense foliage. Within seconds, the squad dissolves entirely into the green background. They vanish into thick, unmapped sections of the Cambodian jungles. Sunlight barely penetrates the heavy triple canopy. The air under the trees stays stagnant and humid. These operators spent days navigating hostile terrain without resupply. If compromised, they frequently faced enemy forces outnumbering them 50-1. The program demanded this exact level of extreme autonomy. SOG commanders maintained a direct, secure communication line straight to the Pentagon, entirely bypassing conventional Army command structures in Saigon. The government built the myth of the phantom soldier by forcing men to operate outside the law. Jerry Shriver disappeared into countries where American military presence did not officially exist.